Issei is a young man who, since he was little, after a tragic accident in which his father died, is marginalized by his brothers, causing him to be recruited by a clan of swordsmen with the aim of hunting demons. But his life falls apart when he is accused of a crime he did not commit. Being killed by his friend Akame, he is transformed into a demon after dying. 3 Chapter 1. Prologue. The Dark Demon Hunter. Forward. I could feel the wounds and bruises from that final battle stalking me, managing to imagine what it would be like to be on the brink of death, having multiple wounds all over my body, but even so these wounds are nothing compared to the hatred and resentment I have at the time. Knowing that the guy who ruined my life lies in front of me limping and shuddering in his scarlet blood, which in turn adorned the ground and my 2 swords. The truth is that I was waiting for this day for a long time, and since I became a swordsman, I was one of the weakest in my group, where in the end I ended up becoming what I once swore to destroy. My ambition, desire for strength and power to demonstrate my great worth condemned those I once considered brothers. Trying for a long time to redeem my mistakes, I was forced to be a deserter, a murderer, a traitor. But I cannot let these feelings of anguish and resentment invade me, although if that means losing my life, I will gladly do so and embrace death if necessary to save those I care about now, especially if it means maintaining that smile. Dark blue eyes and hair as golden and bright as the sun on a beautiful sunset continue to illuminate my dreams and hopes. In the past, when I was a renegade, I didn't care about others. After having lost everything, I had something that told me inside that getting so involved with these demons would bring me great consequences. But, even so, this will be my last battle, and finally I will have a well-deserved rest after so long. The only thing I know is that now I will avenge my people, and that is because I am Issei, the demon hunter. Months ago, on a path full of dirt and around a thick forest, there was a 16-year-old boy walking in the great light of the full moon, being drowned by a heavy rain that wet every corner of his body and clothes. As he walked along the path without a fixed direction to go or somewhere to take shelter from the full rain, he stayed with his face lowered, having a vacant look without any expression on his face, where the only thing he looked at was the sin. Stopping walking his steps in the rain, where in turn small tears of sadness and pain fell from his face. I must be close by now, the boy said as he looked from the top of a cliff, noticing in the distance a large town quite far from civilization. Without wasting any more time, he launched himself down that cliff, skating through the mud where, being very close to the end of the cliff, he fell. He tripped on a small rock, unexpectedly falling into a puddle of mud, completely dirtying his clothes. Just this small scene made him think about the bad luck he had had since leaving his home. Little by little he got up. Not caring about the mud on his clothes, he walked at a faster pace, getting closer and closer to the place that would be his new refuge, at least for the moment, before the opportunity came to have to escape once again. As the boy walked through the thick night, he was watched by the different citizens who looked outside their windows, wondering if he was a traveler or some kind of vagabond who had the bad luck to lose his home, but their faces were quite shocked when he saw them. Seeing that it was not an adult man, before his eyes was a simple 16-year-old boy being hit by the heavy rain. The boy, with enough courage in his spirit, tried to knock on each of the doors of the different houses that he found along his way, hoping that some good Samaritan would respond to the call of a person in need. But the more he tried to achieve his goal, time and again he was rejected and threats reached his ears. If the boy did not leave the place, they would call the authorities to make him leave. Without having any other option, he preferred to leave the place to avoid problems. It's the 10th estate that has rejected me. I think I'll have to sleep in an alley. The boy did not wait any longer and began to head towards the closest alley he could find, and as he entered that place, he could notice that he was not alone. Several of the people who lived on the street had made a home in that alley, where the boy began to go deeper to find out if he would be well received, where to his surprise, no one, not even a soul, turned to look at him. This generated more questions than answers in him, and without hesitation he began to carve out a place quite apart from the other strays in the area. At the moment he took a seat and covered himself from the rain with some cardboard remains, a man approached next to him and sat in front of him. The boy stopped, focusing his gaze on the ground, and began to look at the man in the eyes, who was looking at him from head to toe in a serious and at the same time somewhat tired manner. Man. Hello boy, it seems like you've had a bad day like everyone else here. The man said while giving a slight smile, trying to hide the tiredness he had from not having eaten anything for almost the entire day. Who are you? The boy asked, somewhat curt and serious, while giving a cold look and with some heaviness in his words. Man, excuse my rudeness, I should have introduced myself. Hello, my name is Akira, it's nice to meet you. The man said with some difficulty due to the lack of energy in his body. The boy noticed this and from his raincoat he took out a piece of bread that he had left over and handed it to the man who was lying in front of him. Seeing this gesture of kindness, the man was quite impressed that someone who also lived on the street was capable of giving something as valuable as bread, even if it was not complete it was still like a treasure for him. Akira. Are you sure boy? Aren't you hungry? Without saying a single word the boy just nodded his head as a sign that he didn't mind sharing some of his food with him. The quite happy man took the piece of bread and began to devour it quickly, finishing the food in less than 1 minute, where the boy looked at him expressionlessly, but at the same time with an empty look and with a lack of emotions in his being. The man when he realized this, it caught his attention and he decided to communicate a little. Akira. Boy, come with me, that's where I usually stay, if you want you can stay with me until it stops raining. The man said while pointing towards a small garbage cubicle. The boy did not know what to say and he just stayed meditating for a few seconds on the man's generous offer, and the moment he heard a loud roar in the sky he came to his senses and decided to accept the generous offer. They both got up and quickly headed towards the man's home, where having entered the place which consisted of a large garbage cubicle where inside was an old and dirty mattress and on the roof of the place were covered by large plastic pears held together with tape and rubber bands, revealing the clear glow of the night, but it was enough to keep the rain out of the place. Akira. Sit down boy, it's been a while since anyone has visited my home. Boy. When the rain stops I'll leave, so I don't plan to stay long. Akira. I understand, why don't we talk for a while you leave, it would be good for you to talk to someone. They both took a seat on the mat and tried to look outwards, looking at the incessant full moon that adorned the entire night sky. Man. Tell me boy, what brings you to this miserable town? Hesitating a little in his response, he remained silent for a few seconds while he thought about what to say to the man who was next to him waiting for a response. Boy. You could say that. I'm running away. These words made the man look in the boy's direction and was impressed by his response, which was obviously not expected, where he only remained skeptical and tried to formulate a question that would clear him of his doubts. Akira. Running away. Running from who? Guys. Well, let's say I'm running away from my brothers. Even more confused than before, the poor man wanted to know more about the boy who was next to him. He felt in the depths of his being that the boy was suffering and needed someone to vent that sadness inside him. Akira. I won't force you to tell me, although if you need it I'm here to listen to you. The boy thought for a while he wondered if he should tell them the truth about what had happened in his past. Maybe he shouldn't tell everything, just enough so that they wouldn't know what he had really done. Boy. Maybe it will help me something. The boy settled better where he was while slowly removing the hood of his trench coat, revealing his true appearance, which was a simple 16-year-old boy with brown hair and in turn had several bangs that partially covered his eyebrows and 2 hair extensions that hung parallel to her neck and finally a pair of brown eyes. Boy. My name is Issei. Akira. Nice to meet you boy. The man was stunned by what he was seeing. Before him was a simple boy who did not appear to be a vagabond. The only thing that differentiated him from the high school boys of his age was his young face that seemed more mature thanks to a few fight marks, quite battered clothing full of cuts and some small blood stains covered part of the torso, a black sweatshirt that clung to his body and some sandals that were somewhat strange for his taste. If they looked good they looked more similar to a Japanese maizefeng. The man continued looking at the boy from head to toe, but out of nowhere the boy decided to communicate a little more with him. Issei. I'm going to tell you a small part of my life and that will be all. Akira. Sure, after all that's why we're here. Issei took a big breath of air while he continued looking up at the sky watching the stars of the night, thinking that, if he wanted to tell his story, it was best to start from where it all began. Akira, expectant of what he meant, the boy just stared in the same direction as Issei. Issei. I still remember when it all started, the day my old family turned their back on me. Akira. Back. With a lot of confusion in his words, Akira was thoughtful knowing that he had possibly been kicked out of his house. A small feeling of pity took over Akira and he just looked at him sadly. Issei, without making the man next to him wait any longer, decided to start telling a fragment of his past. Flashback. You could see a little Issei, about 6 years old, preparing to attend the primary school at his school. While he was putting his books in his backpack, he was surprised by one of his sisters who had opened the door without his permission and only found him. She looked serious while remaining silent. Issei, realizing that his sister had entered his room again without his permission, only gave a deep sigh and turned to look at his sister. Issei, are you coming to bother me again, Katsumi? He asked in a monotone tone to the girl now known as Katsumi, who was about 6 years old, being older than Issei only by a few months. Katsumi. Ha ha ha, calm down, I only came because our father asked me to tell you that it's time to go, so stop wasting time and let's go. He said with an arrogant tone and at the same time with some mockery towards his little younger brother. Hearing her, Issei couldn't say anything about her and only gave her a small nod while he looked at her with an annoyed face. Katsumi. Let's go or else I'll be late because of you. Leaving the room, Katsumi left, satisfied that she had been able to bother her little brother, even a little. Issei knew that she couldn't do anything, since on multiple occasions her sister Katsumi and her brother Katashi constantly bothered him. The only one he could find, even a small refuge, was in his younger sister Asami, who always did her best to defend him from his older brothers. Without wasting any more time, Issei began to leave his room, heading towards the living room where he could see that everyone was already having breakfast. Mrs. Hyodo, come son and eat your breakfast. Remaining thoughtful for a while about his mother's words, he finally decided to assent to her words and tried to take a seat next to his brothers, where he already had a plate of breakfast ready for him. When trying to eat the scrambled eggs, he felt a bitter and horrible taste at the same time, where he had to instantly spit out the food from his mouth, feeling the laughter of Katashi and Katsumi, who were laughing loudly at what had happened. Katashi. Ha 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 ha, I told you it would work. Katsumi. Ha 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 ha, that's fun. Trying to catch his breath, Issei drank his glass of orange juice to get rid of that horrible bitter taste that permeated his food. After feeling better, he was going to complain to his two brothers, but Asami, who was upset by what happened, decided to get into the situation. Conflict. Asami. Stop bothering me-san. Asami, without any remorse, shouted at her two older brothers, who looked at her a little surprised and at the same time somewhat incredulous. Issei, seeing that his little sister was defending him, did nothing but stay silent and let the problem go. Katashi. Don't worry, little sister, don't get angry, we just wanted to play a little joke on our little younger brother. Katashi said in a mocking manner while Asami looked at Issei with a smile and offered him half of his breakfast. Seeing this, Issei only looked at her little sister to give her a small smile. Issei. Thank you, little sister. Asami. I love you, Oni-chan. A while later, Issei could be seen in the back of the truck with his three brothers, but he did not pay the slightest attention to Katashi and Katsumi for what they had done to his breakfast, and only focused on his little younger sister while they both enjoyed a bag that contained some delicious candies of different colors. Issei. They are delicious, Asami, thank you. Asami. You're welcome, Oni-chan, I do it because I love you. They were both just enjoying the little moment together while being watched by Katashi and Katsumi, who had devised a new way to annoy their brother. Without wasting time, they put their plan into action where they took a can of soda, shaking it for at least a few seconds. The next step was to offer it to her, where Issei, because he was so focused on being with his little sister, did not realize that he was receiving a can of soda from one of his brothers, where when he opened it a large stream of soda completely covered his face, soaking his uniform from head to toe. Immediately afterwards what could be heard were laughter from both of them, where Issei was already tired of that situation. He burst into anger and rushed towards his brother Katashi, giving him a strong blow to the face, sparking a fight in the back of the vehicle. Both parents were trying to prevent both boys from fighting, but from one moment to the next, due to carelessness, Mr. Hyodo did not realize that when they turned the corner a large truck was about to crash into them. Mrs. Hyodo noticed the giant truck and just gave a loud scream. Careful! Mr. Hyodo responded to the call and tried to get out of the way of the truck by turning left, but that desperate move caused the truck to be hit hard on the right side with such force that the truck began to overturn several times until it finally came to rest. He stopped and was left face down, almost destroyed, where the four brothers gradually regained consciousness, but they were still deeply hurt where they tried to get out quickly, but even so their wounds were quite noticeable, leaving Katsumi and Asami with several bruises and blood falling from their faces. Issei with a piece of metal embedded in one of his arms and in turn with several bruises from the impact, and Katashi being the last one to get out of the truck with some small injuries not as serious as those of his three brothers. Asami. Please Ni-san help mom and dad. Asami said between a sea of tears for seeing her parents completely injured by the impact, where Mrs. Hyodo was fighting to free herself from a piece of metal that had pierced her lower abdomen and while Mr. Hyodo was completely unconscious from the impact. Issei. Upon seeing this situation, an incessant fear of losing his parents took over him and he ran as fast as he could towards the truck, completely ignoring the pain he felt in his arm while a small smell of gasoline came out in jets, flooding the street. Heading towards a small fire very close to the truck. With great force Issei tried to get his mother out of the truck, but she couldn't move. The large piece of metal had pierced an important organ in her body, thus preventing the correct flow of blood to her extremities, but this didn't matter to him. Issei just kept pulling on his mother's clothes again and again trying to get her off. From one moment to the next Katashi quickly approached Issei, taking him by the neck, leading him away from the place. Issei. Leave me Katashi, I have to save mom. Katashi. Shut up and let them help us. At that moment Issei could notice how the man who had driven the truck that had hit them recently was trying to help them get his mother out. The man, with great strength, managed to open the door of the truck, managing to carefully remove Mrs. Hyodo, leaving her next to the children who stayed with her to help her. But at the moment the man was going to take Mr. Hyodo, who was still unconscious in the front of the truck, noticed how a spark next to the puddle of gasoline began to ignite it, creating a fire that spread throughout the place quickly. The only thing he could think of was to throw himself to the ground where no less than 3 seconds passed when the car exploded in a large explosion, completely killing Mr. Hyodo. The four brothers were waiting for the scene where they had been shocked by the explosion. A silence took over the place when it was completely broken by Asami's tears and whimpers, who could not believe that her father had died. Asami. Dad, sniff sniff, you can't be dead. The youngest of the Hyodo's whimpers were comforted by Katsumi who, like her, had tears in her eyes for what had happened. Katashi just looked at this and was still in shock for having lost his father. Issei, who was watching her little younger sister crying, tried to approach Asami to try to calm her down, but he didn't expect that a strong blow to her face would send him to the ground again. When he raised his head he could see Katashi with his arm extended and his fist clenched looking at him with great anger. Issei. Katashi, but why? Katashi. Shut up. Surprised that his brother would hit him like that, he tried to look for an answer, but he only got both Katashi and Katsumi to look at him with angry faces and rejection of him. Katashi. Because of your damn fault our father is dead, and not only that, now our mother can die. Issei. But I don't. He couldn't finish speaking as Katsumi slapped him on his right cheek while his teeth gnashed in anger. Katsumi. If you hadn't caused that fight, our father would be alive. You are a murderer. Katsumi's words were the only ones that could be heard in the place, where an uncomfortable silence was felt completely. Issei knew that it was not entirely his fault and he wanted to know if his little sister Asami blamed him in the same way, but when he tried again approaching her was again stopped by Katashi and Katsumi who prevented him from passing. Katashi. Stay away from her, she already suffered enough, I don't want her to have to suffer more because of you. Katsumi. I don't want you to be near us. Issei, without any other options, turned around as he ran quickly leaving the accident site and his eyes began to crystallize, crying profusely for what had happened. End of flashback. Issei had finished speaking with Akira, who was completely shocked by what had happened. Just thinking that he had been unfairly blamed for what had happened that day made him feel angry at how immature his brothers had been at that time. Akira. I'm really sorry boy. Issei. It doesn't matter, that happened 10 years ago and I've already managed to get over it. A while passed in which they both stayed talking about different situations in life, when out of nowhere the rain began to disappear, making them both realize that the time had come for their paths to separate. Issei, without waiting another minute, got up and left Akira's home where the last thing Akira said to him was, "Take care boy." Issei began to walk aimlessly trying to follow his path, he knew that he had to leave that town as soon as possible, or else they would find him. End prologue. Ch1 of 38 next. 2. Chapter 1, A Sea of Pain. The Dark Demon Hunter. Chapter 1 Inch A Sea of Pain. Continuing on his way, Issei made his way through the thick night trying to get as far away from the town as possible. Where he walked for about 15 minutes, remaining thoughtful until out of nowhere he ran into a couple of no more than 40 years old who had an umbrella that covered them from the rain. They stared at him for a while thinking that he was a simple homeless man from the surrounding town, but upon looking at him carefully they realized that he was simply a boy no older than 17 years old who was completely wet and dirty from head to toe. Issei just ignored the couple, moving away a little and continuing on his way, but he was stopped by the man who grabbed him by the sleeve of his trench coat, drawing his attention and only looking in the direction of the man behind him. Man, hey boy, this is no place for young people like you, where are your parents? Issei just stared blankly at the man, revealing a sea of emotionlessness on his part. This was clearly seen by the couple who were completely impressed by the emptiness in his gaze. Freeing herself from the man's grip, she turned around and decided to continue on her way, slowly moving away from the couple, but what she did not expect was that the man stood in front of her trying to prevent her from continuing on her way. Issei, please move away. Man, I'm sorry boy, but I need to know where your parents are. Issei, already a little annoyed, gave an angry look at the man who did not feel intimidated and decided to continue standing there, avoiding his path. Issei, I can't tell you where they are, because I don't have parents. The words of the boy in front of him were enough to make him stay there for a few seconds, and the only thing he could think was that the boy was a street orphan. The woman who was waiting for the scene only looked at the boy with some sadness when she saw how young she was, and she only imagined what the boy must be suffering. Once again Issei began to walk once again surrounding the man who was preventing him from continuing on his way trying to escape from that situation, and once again he was stopped, but this time by the woman who had a sad face. Woman, wait, a boy as young as you shouldn't be on the streets. Issei, don't worry, I've been alone for a long time. Man, my wife is right, we can't allow a boy like you to wander alone in the dead of night. Issei, a little surprised, decided to turn around again to look at the couple who gave him a big and sincere smile on their faces, which left him quite confused as to why two unknown people would dare to help a complete stranger they met on the street. Issei, I don't understand, why do you care? Quite confused Issei decided to ask to clear his doubts. This question made them both look at each other, where in the end they gave a small sincere smile that confused Issei more, generating more doubts than answers. Man, although it may not seem like it, we usually help people like you. Woman, yes, and since you have nowhere to go, would you like to spend the night at our house? Issei. His question was confusing and at the same time strange for him. At no time did he imagine that he would end up sleeping in a cave or on the floor of a forest as was customary, but now some simple people were offering him a night's lodging in their house, which for his taste was not entirely normal. Issei. I don't understand, many people in the town rejected my requests and now you offer me your house to sleep. Man. Well boy, what happens is that lately many people in town have been disappearing for unknown reasons, so you must understand a little the distrust of people when a stranger comes knocking on their door in the middle of the night. Woman. So do you want to join us? Issei remained thoughtful for a while he touched his chin with his hand, analyzing whether it was a good idea to stay with those people. Thinking several times through his head, he finally agreed to stay with the couple. Issei. Fine, but it will only be for tonight. Woman. Don't worry, you will be very comfortable, I think our daughter will like you a lot. The woman gave a small mischievous smile making strange insinuations, but Issei seemed not to pay attention to this situation and remained completely expressionless looking at the woman, where she, seeing that her intentions had no effect on him, blushed with sadness and decided turn around and end that uncomfortable situation. Man. Shall we go? Issei. Yes. The three began to take a short walk to the house which was very close to the town where they had met Akira. The couple decided to open the door, entering the three of them into the house, where upon entering they were well received by a girl of about 16 years old with short blonde hair, bright amber eyes, and wearing a black t-shirt that denoted her great attributes and a sweatshirt of the same color. Mom, Dad are finally back. Very animated, she headed towards her parents with clear happiness, where the couple, upon seeing their daughter, were filled with happiness and only greeted their daughter with a hug which lasted a few minutes until they separated. Man. I hope you behaved well, Leonie. Leonie. Yes, but who is he? Said the girl now known as Leonie, pointing to Issei who was behind them expectant of the whole scene. Man. Well, he is an orphan boy, so we invite him to stay with us for today. Leonie stared from head to toe at the boy completely unknown to her, noticing that he still had his black trench coat on which did not allow his face to be seen. The only thing she could distinguish through that shadow that covered his face were his brown eyes. Getting a little closer to Issei, With great curiosity she removed the hood that covered her head to better appreciate his appearance, remaining a little thoughtful, but at the same time her face changed to a small blush on her cheeks, since Issei at first glance despite after being dirty and completely wet from head to toe from the rain, it was still somewhat attractive to his taste. Leonie. Nice to meet you, I'm Kosaka Leonie. Tilting her torso and head a little, she gave a polite greeting towards Issei who was observing her in a neutral manner. But soon Issei did exactly the same, but this time he made a kind of salute by placing his right fist at the height of his heart while tilting his head down a little. The girl just smiled at Issei's greeting and then she motioned to the bathroom of the house so that she could go take a shower because she seriously stinked because of the clothes she had on. Leonie, if you want, you can use the bathtub while I wash your clothes. Issei was a little surprised, although obviously with his serious attitude he hid it very well. The great hospitality that this family was showing him was something that was not seen every day. He even dared to think that their intentions might not reach to be very good, to say the least, but he still decided to accept because of the great fatigue he had had from walking for hours. Issei. Thank you. Issei began to walk towards the bathroom where upon arriving he tried to take off his black trench coat, and then took off his blood-stained shirt, his black sweatshirt and finally his sandals, leaving him completely without clothes. Outside the bathroom, Leonie was looking at the bathroom, wondering why that boy would be wandering alone in the woods, but no matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't find a concrete answer, so she remained thoughtful for a few minutes until she was interrupted by her mother who told her. He watched with a strange look. Woman, is something wrong with you, daughter? Leonie left her thoughts for a moment and turned around looking at her mother who was staring into her eyes. Leonie. It's nothing like a mother, it's just that this boy fills me with curiosity. Woman. Me too, just looking at him gives me the impression that he recently lost someone very important. Maybe you can cheer him up a little. These words left Leonie a little confused as she raised an eyebrow as a sign of not understanding what her mother was referring to. Leonie. Why me? Woman. Well, because you are a girl his age, so you are the most appropriate to talk to him. Besides, don't you find him somewhat attractive? A small silence was heard throughout the room in which Leonie did not know what to respond. Creating not one but several lumps in her throat which prevented her from refuting anything that would make her mother not think badly about the situation, since she never in the past he had been interested in deepening some type of affection or approach to a specific boy. The only thing that interested him and making it very clear was that the little interest he was having in Issei was just simple curiosity to know who he was and where from. It comes, nothing more. Leonie. Ha 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 ha, Mom, please. Do you really think I would be interested in that boy? She said with some mockery, having a funny expression on her face, where her mother only gave a small sigh of defeat. Woman. It's always the same with you, but it's your problem anyway. The woman turned around, leaving the place, being watched by Leonie, who was very thoughtful about the situation. She gave the matter several thoughts, but finally ended up ignoring it and went to do something else. A while later, Issei was having dinner with the Kosaka family, but something was happening and it was that he was the center of attention from the family, but especially from Leonie who kept an eye on him, pretending to suspect something. This was noted by Issei who did not give it much importance, since he had no need to tell memories of his past with those people. His serious face while he finished eating did not go unnoticed and, very intrigued to satisfy his curiosity, they decided to break the ice with the brown-haired man. Woman. Excuse me Issei-kun. Turning his eyes in the direction of the woman, observing her in a serious and cold manner, he only implied that his emotions had been completely blocked for a reason and that was what caught the attention of the members of the Kosaka family the most. Woman. We would like to know where you come from. The woman's words made everyone pay attention to the question and their gazes focused on Issei who was still observing the woman with that penetrating and serious look which shook her a little, but Issei was not interested in telling a story again. Fragment of his past, he had already done it in that alley a while ago and there was no way he would want to remember his old brothers again. Issei. I'm sorry, but it's personal. Leonie. What do you mean it's personal? Leonie said, a little dissatisfied with his response and only asked for more information without taking into account that Issei did not want to tell absolutely anything about his past to people who, although they welcomed him into their home, still considered them complete strangers. Issei. I don't have to say it, my past is not something I like to tell everyone. With clear displeasure in his words towards Leonie, he responded in the most sincere way possible to avoid future problems with the girl. Leonie, noticing those eyes full of an existential emptiness, could notice a clear pain and suffering in his being, as if the most important part of each person had been torn away by force. Man! Enough, Leonie, leave him alone. With a clear tone of authority, Leonie's father reprimanded her for her behavior, making her only turn her face in clear annoyance, but at the same time she understood Issei's words well and preferred to wait for him to be ready to see if at some point he decided to tell her something about his past. A few minutes passed in which everyone had already finished dinner and Leonie's father ordered him to guide Issei to the guest room so that he could sleep peacefully. Leonie, reluctantly agreeing because of having to put up with a grumpy guest, decided to show Issei the room as soon as possible so she wouldn't have to see him. They both walked through the corridors in which Leonie looked askance at Issei, who only remained thoughtful to himself, as if he were lost in his own world. This bothered Leonie, who to get his attention she slid the door of the room so loud that a roar was heard throughout the hallway, making Issei turn to look in her direction. Leonie, well, here you can sleep for the night. Issei, thank you. Entering the room he could see that it didn't have that many things other than a small bed on one side of the room along with a small nightstand and a closet on the other side of the room. Leonie, I'll let you rest, good night. At the moment Leonie was going to leave the room, she realized that Issei was not heading towards the bed to lie down and sleep. The difference was that he took a seat next to one of the walls of the room, and then closed his eyes, falling completely asleep. This action on Issei's part left Leonie somewhat confused, who never imagined finding someone who slept that way, but for Issei that was already very common. After having spent weeks traveling from one place to another where the only place where could sleep was on the floor, so it was no surprise that he began to get used to sleeping that way. Leonie only tried to close the door to the room and go to rest. While Issei was already completely asleep, or rather memories of his past kept appearing, which always ended up tormenting him every night. Memory. In a dark room full of candles that decorated the entire scene were several children gathered in dark blue clothing similar to those of a temple, where each and every one of them observed the man in front of them, who was wearing clothes from the temple. Same color, only the difference was that he had several black folds, hair tied in a ponytail, goatee style, black eyes and a katana on his right waist. The man looked with extreme seriousness at the group of children who did not know what to respond or what to do in the situation, but it did not take long until the man decided to speak. Wherever you are, wherever you go, you must never forget who you are, what your path was like. You are Ozunu, you are part of us and we are part of you, that is the truth of their lives and the truth will prevail after death. Looking to his right, where emerging from the shadows was a small brown-haired boy with brown eyes who had a serious look and at the same time observed the other children in the room. He is our new brother Issei. He has been granted the honor of being part of us, receive him just like one of us. I remember too. Enough, Issei, if you don't train, Master Kanbi is going to make you work twice as hard. Issei. Come on Kuro, not everything can be combat and training. Both boys were on a path where pink petals fell everywhere, dazzling the beauty of the forests. From one moment to the next, little Issei began to run towards a small mountain which was quite far from the training temple, where Kuro, being older than Issei, began to follow him to avoid having problems with his teachers. Kuro. This is forbidden territory, Master Soma will not be happy. But nothing stopped him. The ceaselessness of his steps and the desire to climb the mountain to be able to see beyond the temple was an indescribable sensation for little Issei. Little by little he was getting closer to the top and he could already see the glow of the sunlight making him even more excited, but at the moment he was about to reach the top, two silhouettes prostrated themselves before him. The first was that of a tall man in a warrior's costume with a large white beard and hair in a ponytail. The second silhouette corresponded to a small girl of around 6 years old with coal-black hair and crimson-red eyes, and a black suit with some red details. With a clear nervousness in her eyes while drops of sweat fell down her throat and she swallowed her saliva, Issei didn't know what to say when he had one of her teachers in front of him. Issei. Master Soma, this is not what it seems. Soma. You never learn, you always cause problems when you want to. Hitting Issei's forehead with his index finger caused him to fall down the large ravine, falling at a great speed where a few centimeters after touching the ground he was caught by the belt of his suit and left on the ground. Soma. You are not ready to see the outside yet, remember that you live for a purpose and that is to defend the world from the disgusting demons. Issei. I know, Master, but Soma. I don't want excuses. Brings Kuro to continue training. Following orders, little Issei only got up from the ground and then cleaned his training clothes and then began to follow his teacher, where at his side was the little girl looking at him. Ha ha ha, you always cause problems, silly. Issei. Don't bother. I remember 3. Somewhere in the temple was Issei leaning against the floor of the war zone, where the only thing visible to him was the gigantic bloodshed of his brothers. In small steps, the only thing that mattered to him was returning to his duty and continuing to protect his teacher alongside the other brothers who stayed to take care of him. Fire, crying and despair were the only things that were visible in that situation, but, although he had severe wounds all over his body, that was not an impediment to returning to his brothers to try to protect them, even if he was not a true warrior. When he reached the safe area, his face of pain changed to one of shock when he found each and every one of his brothers dead, some with their throats cut and others with their severed limbs covering the entire place with blood. In his mind he only wondered who could have done it. Having done such an atrocity, if that area of the temple was the safest place he knew, but without caring about anything he began to run, ignoring his wounds, looking for that man who behaved with him as if he were a father, that man who had to protect everyone. Coast, the one who trusted him despite all the suffering of his training, but it was too late. The only thing he found was his body pierced from side to side with a large pool of blood around him while a great fire began to spread throughout the temple. Master. Kneeling before his master's body, he could do nothing but remain motionless, until end memories. From one moment to the next, Issei woke up sweating all over his body while he had a face of fear as he remembered once again the body of his inert master. Several thoughts of fear and trepidation were reflected in his mind as he remembered that horrible tragedy from the past, but Issei was taken out of his thoughts, since on the other side of the room was a large female silhouette which had a black trench coat next to it. To a large katana in his right hand and another katana wrapped in chains surrounding both the handle of the katana and its sheath. The female figure was looking at Issei with hatred and anger while he rubbed his sword against the floor of the room, showing that his intentions were hostile. I finally find you, Issei. Issei. No, not you. Issei had been left speechless by the person lying in front of him and only got up from the ground and then stood face to face with the woman. I should give you credit. You are not easy to locate and you know how to hide your tracks very well, but that is not enough. Issei. I guess you're coming to kill me for the charges. What do you eat? You guess. The girl rushed towards Issei out of nowhere, where the moment the sword was about to cut him, she quickly crouched down, avoiding the cut, and then turned around, moving away from her attacker, placing herself in a defensive position. From one moment to the next, the girl, upon recovering, moved at a great speed that Issei could not follow and generated several cuts on both Issei's legs and chest, which left large amounts of blood in their wake, which adorned the floor of the building, the room. I'm going to kill you for what you did. Issei. You should know that I'm not that easy to kill. The girl once again went to attack him, but Issei, in a quick movement, threw herself out of the bedroom window, falling into the patio outside the house, where she began to run deep into the forest. The girl, noticing that his prey was escaping, he had no choice but to start following him to kill him, and like Issei he went deeper into the forest. With Leonie. Leonie was sleeping peacefully in her room, but was woken up by a small noise resulting from the small fight that occurred in the other room. With clear confusion, she got up from her bed and quickly headed towards the guest room, where upon entering she could notice a small pool of blood on the floor and a large hole in the bedroom window. Getting a little closer to the pool of blood, she placed her index and middle fingers, taking a sample on her fingers, and then began to sniff it, realizing that the blood had a very familiar aroma. Leonie. It seems I already know something about you. Jumping out of the room window, he began to run in the same direction in which Issei had escaped from his assassin. With Issei running through the thick forest without stopping, with adrenaline at its maximum, he did not know how much longer it would be until those who wanted him dead would quench their thirst by wanting to see his blood flow like a great red river, but without caring at all, he did not care. He would die so easily, not until he fulfilled his last wish, and nothing was going to stop him. But his escape did not last long until he reached the end of the path, where there was a large waterfall about 10 meters high blocking his way to continue running for his life. It's time to die, Issei. Turning around, he observed the girl in the black trench coat, who was approaching at a slow pace and clashing the tip of her sword with the rocks of the place, generating a sharp sound accompanied by the endless rain. With a clear resignation and serious look on her face, she observed the girl who would soon attack him without thinking. Cold sweating while he looked at his former friend's katana only made him think about how miserable his life had been up to this point, but that was no impediment to trying to redeem his mistakes. Issei. If you're going to kill me, at least have the decency to look me in the eyes when you do it, Akame. The girl stopped dead, remaining motionless in her place where from one moment to the next she began to take off her black trench coat and throw it on the ground, demonstrating her true appearance, which was a light-skinned girl, with crimson-red eyes, black hair and a suit, which consisted of a black vest, a small skirt of the same color, red gloves and a belt and tie of the same color. Akame. Last words. Issei. I hope to see your father in the afterlife. These words only made the girl angry and she lunged at great speed, stabbing her sword into Issei's stomach, causing him to spit out a large amount of blood from his mouth, but it didn't end there as he gave a large, deep horizontal cut and another diagonal cut on Issei's chest, making him fall down the great waterfall, where the girl, looking for the place where his body had fallen, came to the idea that he had been dragged by the current of the river. Akame. You're finally dead. The girl just sheathed her sword, put on her raincoat and left the scene. A few minutes later Leone reached the end of the path, where he found no trace of Issei and much less of the person who had attacked him. Getting a little closer to the great waterfall and noticing the small amounts of blood that had not yet been washed away by the rain, he thought with horror that someone really wanted Issei dead and he only wondered, what would he have done to have him murdered with blood? Cold. End Chapter 1. Previous ch2 of 38 next. Chapter 3. Chapter 2 Grimor Clan. The Dark Demon Hunter. Chapter 2 Inches Grimor Clan. In the city of Kuo, more specifically in the Hyodo family house, you could see a small family made up of 3 specific members, where the father of the family had died years ago in a tragic car accident. The mother of the home had decided to keep their children working from abroad by sending them money for their support. The eldest son of the Katashi Hyodo family, considered by many to be the perfect boy, with good grades, quite tall for being from the east, a natural athlete, popular with girls since he was in high school and quite good looking for his age. The first daughter, Katsumi Hyodo, considered an almost perfect beauty, but being below the 2 Oni-sama of the Kuo Academy, currently joined the Taekwondo and Kendo club, being quite popular with the boys and admired by all the girls in the school. Kuo Academy for her great enthusiasm, but being quite upright and aggressive with men. Finally, the youngest daughter of the family, Asami Hyodo, considered the tender and spoiled girl of the Kuo Academy, being in the top of the most beautiful and attractive girls in the school, being an innate athlete, being in the soccer club, tennis and swimming. Her popularity was due to her great charisma and kindness to others, but she was quite cold if she put her mind to it. Katashi Hyodo 17 years old 3rd year of Kuo Academy. Katsumi Hyodo 16 years old 2nd year of Kuo Academy. Asami Hyodo 15 years old 1st year of Kuo Academy. In the Hyodo family house, a beautiful girl could be seen preparing breakfast for her siblings. This was Asami Hyodo, who had been taking over the duty of making food at home since her mother decided to work abroad. Trying harder and harder to keep his 2 beloved brothers happy. He gloated over how well he had learned to cook since he was 4 years old. But he couldn't waste so much time since that day all 3 of them had to attend the academy. Since apparently now due to certain events that happened yesterday they had to make a deal with the idol of the Kuo Academy, where the 3 were involved in an incident where Katashi had been killed by a strange being with similar black wings to those of a crow, so in exchange for being able to save him, both girls made a pact in which they both decided to be his servants in exchange for saving Katashi. While Asami was lost in her thoughts, a small silhouette behind her began to slowly approach until it finally gave a loud scream, scaring her on the spot. Turning around quickly she could tell that it was her brother Katashi trying to play a bad joke on her. Asami. Ni-san, you are a fool. Hitting her brother's chest with her fists, she began to insult him again and again for having scared her, to which Katashi only responded to her insults with a hearty laugh. Katashi. You are always so easy to scare, little sister. Asami. You know I hate that you do that. Katashi. That's why I do it. Pouting very tenderly, he only turned around to continue cooking, but at that moment Katsumi had arrived, rubbing her eyes with both hands, denoting that she had just woken up from the loud scream of her little sister. Katsumi. You two always make a lot of noise. Katashi. I just wanted to bother Asami for a bit. Asami. You are very annoying, Ni-san. A while later the three brothers had dedicated themselves to eating their breakfast prepared by Asami, and then the three of them were ready to leave for Kuo Academy. But something stopped them in the act, and that was that Katashi and Katsumi could notice how their sister Asami was. He looked at the living room shelf at a certain photograph taken approximately 10 years ago where all the members of his family were. But something peculiar about the photo was that a part of it was missing, where one of the family members was missing, but because of the time it was not so visible who was missing in the photo, only the three brothers and their parents could be seen. Asami stared at that photo while she remembered the incident in which her father died years ago. A small face of sadness appeared on her knowing that tragic day she lost her beloved father. Katashi and Katsumi noticed this and quickly grabbed Asami's shoulders, moving her away from the photo of her so she wouldn't feel bad, since of the three of her, she was the one who loved her late father the most. Katashi. Asami, we already talked about this, we have to move forward and not stay in the past. Asami. I know. Quickly leaving through the exit door of her house, Asami had a sad look and her face was lowered because of that photo. Katashi. Katsumi, leave that in place and let's go. Katashi ended up leaving the place following his little sister. Katsumi left the photo on the living room shelf and took a look at it, in which she remembered her father fondly, but when she saw the small hole where a certain person was missing, her face changed to one of anger as she clenched her fists tightly. Katsumi stared at the photograph for a while until she finally decided not to pay any more attention to that matter and began to head towards the academy to take classes normally. And so a normal day passed for the three brothers, where they carried out their club activities and also finished the private classes for the day. Until finally the bell arrived that ended the classes for that day, but for the three brothers that day still had not finished, since they were very excited to know what would be the reason why they were needed in the most prestigious club in the entire school, and they only began to go to said club that was known as the Occult Club, where certain the club had its main base in an old building next to the Kuo Academy. The three brothers decided to enter the large building, where they climbed a large staircase that reached the highest floor of the building, where at the end of the path a large wooden door stood between them and the club site. Katashi. Are you ready? Katsumi. Asami. Yes. Approaching the door, he knocked about 3 times to see if anyone was home, where a few seconds passed in which the door was opened, showing a large living room where in the center there were several pieces of furniture surrounding a small wooden table, and in the center, in the background, was a large wooden desk where the number 1 idol of the Kuo Rias Grimori Academy was prostrated, and next to her was a woman with large breasts and a statuesque body with black hair tied by an orange ribbon, better known as Akano Himahima, at her side. On the right side was a blonde girl with green eyes with an innocent appearance. In the center of the room, sitting in one of the armchairs, was a small girl with gray hair and amber eyes, and next to her a boy with blonde hair and blue eyes. The three brothers recognized perfectly who those 3 people were, since they were the most popular individuals in the entire academy they attended. Welcome, my name is Rias Grimori. A girl with a statuesque body and crimson-red hair spoke, addressing the 3 brothers, who, being in the same place with the most popular people in the academy, did nothing but show respect. Rias, please take a seat. Nodding to their request imposed by Rias, the 3 brothers just sat down. Rias. Well, Katashi Hyodo, you might wonder why the 3 of you had to come to see me. Katashi. If I'm honest, I don't know. Rias. The reason is very simple, and it is that at this moment you and your sisters are my slaves. Those simple words left the atmosphere in a deep silence, in which the 3 had faces of complete disbelief, Katashi being the most surprised. Only a few seconds passed when, coming to their senses, they began to look at the other boys in the room, just in case. Perhaps all of this was a bad joke, but great was his surprise that no one was laughing at the situation, which had Katashi quite confused. Katashi. Wait, what do you mean we are your slaves? Rias was about to speak when Asia interrupted her by whispering in her ear, leaving her with a surprised face that she had forgotten about such an important matter. Her completely relaxed face changed to a more serious one as she remembered what happened yesterday when 2 of her servants had found a certain dying boy in the middle of the forest. Flashback. In the cold and thick night there were 2 girls, both protected by an umbrella while they were talking about how their night had been. Asia-san. The other girl with blonde hair and green eyes turned her gaze towards her friend who had short white hair and hazel eyes, looking at her in a serious and expressionless manner. This would be your first contract as a demon, but are you sure you want to be next to our president? The girl known as Asia only thought for a while about her answer, looking for a while at the large full moon that was prostrate in the sky, until finally she gave a small smile towards her friend and with a calm and sincere tone of voice decided to answer. Asia. I'm sure, the president gave me a new chance to live and new friends to fight for. I don't regret anything. The white-haired girl, upon hearing these words, could only give a very small, almost imperceptible smile, and they only continued on their way through the dark night of the place, until by pure chance Asia looked towards the dark forest, and was able to notice something very strange that caught her attention. Stopping dead in her place, looking more closely at the forest, he caught the attention of her friend, who she didn't know was happening. Asia-san, what's going on? Asia. I don't know, but I think there's something there, Kaneko-chan. The girl now known as Kaneko intensified her senses more and decided to better observe the panorama around her, where she could notice something strange in the deepest part of the forest. Kaneko. Asia-san, contact the president while I investigate who it is. Asia only nodded to his words, and through a strange circle that surrounded her ear, as if she were some type of communicator, she tried to call someone. Kaneko, without wasting any more time, entered the forest following the small trail that his eyes followed, but the further he went, the more he felt that what he would find would not be anything good. After walking for a while through the dark forest, he finally came to a large river that extended throughout the place. At first he only thought that Asia had seen the large river, but that thought changed when he was able to notice a small puddle of what was on a small rock, which seemed to be blood. His neutral face changed to a serious one when he could notice several lines of blood near the bank of the river, and that was when he began to walk following the trail without knowing what he would find. A while passed in which the girl continued searching until in the distance she could see something, or rather someone, completely injured with a hole in her stomach accompanied by 2 cuts on the upper part of her body accompanied by a large pool of blood, which became bigger and bigger as time went by. When he was close to the body he was able to notice the deep wounds, but, although it was a high school boy close to his age, what caught his attention the most was the fact that he was still alive. Without wasting any more time I create a small magic circle in his ear. Kaneko. Asia-chan, I need you to come immediately. Asia. The president is on her way, but what is happening? Kaneko. I need your help, come quickly. A while later Asia had arrived at Kaneko's location, getting a horrible surprise for her taste. Asia. Bu, but what happened? He said while he stuttered and opened his green eyes wide in horror at the large pool of blood that adorned the horrible scene. Kaneko. I don't know, but I need you to try to cure him. So. Crouching next to the injured boy, he placed his hands together while he closed his eyes, creating an emerald green energy that little by little intensified as time went by, whereby concentrating that energy near the boy's body, the large hemorrhages began to heal little by little, momentarily stopping the bleeding, but Asia's face was beginning to worry Kaneko, and she only wondered why that boy's wounds were not completely healed. Kaneko. What's wrong, Asia-san? Asia. His wounds are too deep and he has lost too much blood, even if I manage to heal him. I doubt he will survive. Just these words left the white-haired girl speechless when she saw that boy in that state, and she only wondered why they would kill him in such a brutal way, but Kaneko was taken out of her thoughts when a species began to form behind her, of a red circle with some engravings on it. From that bright red circle, 2 girls appeared. The first was a young girl of around 17 years old, beautiful with white skin, blue-green eyes, long crimson-red hair very similar to blood, and a statuesque and voluptuous body like that of a model. The second girl was the same age as the other girl, but the difference was that she had long black hair held in a ponytail by an orange ribbon, violet eyes, and a rather voluptuous and provocative body for her age. Kaneko, seeing both girls, quickly stood up to the red-haired girl while he looked into her eyes. Kaneko. President Rias, Akano-san, we have a problem. Pointing in Asia's direction, the girl now known as Rias observed the situation where she could notice a young boy close to her age with 3 large cuts on his body while a large pool of blood came out of the hole in his stomach. Quite surprised, her calm expression changed to a very serious one as she wondered what had happened, but she did not want to ask for the moment and she only approached the boy's dying body, while she was followed by Kaneko and Akano. When they approached the boy they had no words to describe the great damage that his body had suffered, although she knew that in the past she could see very serious wounds, they were almost nothing comparable to those that the boy had in front of his eyes. Of the Rias. Tell me, what happened to Kaneko? Rias asked with an authoritarian tone towards the little white-haired loli, who only kept her typical expressionless face. Kaneko. I don't know, we just found it like this. Hearing that answer, Rias had no doubt. He had been attacked by some demon or fallen angel and he just started looking at Akano seriously while he nodded his head letting the girl know what he had to do. Akano. I understand. Standing up and creating a kind of magic circle around her, her outfit began to change to that of a priestess, having her entire upper part white in a large long red skirt, and then colored wings began to grow from her back. Black very similar to those of a bat, where it took flight to the sky to reconnoiter the area. Rias, having one of her slaves recognize the place, only turned her gaze towards Kaneko and Asia who were trying to keep the boy alive as long as possible. Although Asia's healing was quite effective in preventing bleeding, the truth was that the large deep wound in his stomach did not close easily, reaching the point that the wound did not heal in any way. Rias, do you think you can save him, Asia? A rather uneasy Asia with a worried and monotonous face answered Rias' question. Asia, I can heal the open wounds on his body, but he has already lost a lot of blood. He will die before I can save him. Asia's words left Rias thinking about what she had to do. The big problem that could be caused by the fact that a random boy had died thanks to possibly a being from another faction being responsible, left her uneasy, but at the same time she was very curious to know why they wanted to kill him. Giving a big sigh she ended up resigning herself and leaving the scene. He prepared another magic circle to leave the place. Asia. Wait, President, what do you plan to do? Rias. We can't do anything for him, his body is very hurt and I don't see the point of us still being here. We must go. Kaneko, who is the least interested in the boy's health, only stood up from the spot accompanying Rias in the magic circle, but the blonde-haired girl did not seem to want to give in to wanting to save the almost dead boy. Rias. We must go, Asia-chan. But at that moment a few small tears began to fall from Asia's face while she put more pressure on the boy's wound trying to save him. Akano, who had already arrived from her reconnaissance mission, noticed this action done by the girl and got a little closer to her to try to persuade her, but Asia did not seem to give in to her attempts to save him. Akano. Asia-chan must. She couldn't finish her sentence as Asia interrupted her. Asia. I'm not going to leave and let him die. We're supposed to protect people, so don't ask me to leave and let him die, because I'm not going to do that. Asia's words left everyone perplexed and they remained thoughtful for a few moments, until Rias, giving a big sigh, made an important decision and from one of her pockets she took out a small red and silver box and inside it were several pieces. Red chess set. Akano, noticing the actions of her friend, was surprised when Rias took a small piece with the appearance of a bright red horse. Taking her friend's shoulder, he looked at her seriously while he tried to persuade her. Akano. Are you sure, Rias? Remember that there is no turning back. At Akano's words, Rias was somewhat thoughtful for a few moments about her decision. She knew that reincarnation as a demon was not something that could be reversed, but even so, seeing her little bishop cry, she could not contain her doubts and decided, help the boy. Rias. Yes, it is possible that he is someone strong. After all those injuries make me think that he knows how to use the sword. I don't see the problem with giving him the rank of knight. Akano understood her friend's words and decided to stop interfering. Rias didn't waste any more time and began to create a large magic circle around the boy's body and the horse piece floated near his chest as if it were going to enter him. Then Rias began to recite some words. Become my faithful servant, protect me and serve me as your new mistress, dedicating your life to me for all eternity. The large red circle began to shine more intensely while little by little the horse piece entered his chest where the boy began to scream in pain and despair, mentioning some words that no one understood. I'm not a murderer. The ritual ended in which everyone remained expectant at the last words of the brown-haired boy, but downplaying that Rias began to create another magic circle to leave the place. End of flashback. Rias. I understand, you already know what to do, Asia. The blonde girl only nodded to Rias' request and proceeded to head towards a room on the side of the main room, where upon entering she could notice how the boy they had met yesterday was sitting on the bed observing everything. The panorama of the place quite confused. Asia, seeing him completely healthy, only thanked Rias for helping him, since she, having been a former member of the church, could not bear to see others suffer in such a brutal way and when she saw that boy almost on the verge of death, her simple principles urged her to help him. The boy, upon realizing that he was not alone, directed his gaze towards the blonde-haired girl who shivered a little at the serious and cold look of that boy, apart from the fact that he did not know what to think when he saw him with the torso of his body completely exposed, accompanied by the large wounds that had already healed on his body. Asia. Ko, how do you feel? I'm fine, but who are you? Asia. My name is Asia Argento, and what is your name? My name is Hyodo Issei. When Asia heard that last name, she couldn't help but think that it sounded somewhat familiar, but she still didn't know where she had heard it. Thinking about that topic for a while, she didn't realize that Issei was expressionless while he looked at her from head to toe, analyzing whether that girl had saved him from death after her former friend murdered him in cold blood. Issei. Hey, I need to know something. Asia. What do you need? Issei. Were you the one who saved me from death? He asked without hesitation while the blonde was thoughtful for a while about his answer. Asia. Well, I kept you alive, since you had very deep wounds, but the one who saved you was my president. Issei. In that case, I thank you, Asia Argento. Turning around in the direction of a closet, he took the top part of his clothes to put them on and tried to leave the place by jumping out of the window, where he was quickly stopped by Asia, who stood in the middle, preventing him from doing that madness. Issei. Please move away, I have to go. Asia. Wait, my president wants to talk to you. Looking at the girl who had a determined look and at the same time some nervousness, he began to think that he had not yet thanked that supposed president that Asia talked so much about for saving him from death. Issei. Fine, I'll talk to her, but then I have to go. Asia. Okay, then come with me. Both Issei and Asia headed towards the door of the room where, upon opening it, they were completely the center of attention from everyone present in the main room. Most of the looks were faces relaxed from seeing the boy who was almost on the verge of death completely healthy and breathing. Rias. I see that you're finally awake. Well, now that we're finally all. Rias's face when looking at the three brothers was one of complete confusion as they were completely in shock as they looked at the individual who prostrated himself in front of them. Kadashi's face intensified, her pupils dilated completely and her mouth was almost open from not believing what she was seeing. Katsumi's face was one of complete disbelief for a few moments, but that expression changed to one of anger and annoyance at seeing that boy. On Asami's part, his face was not very different from Kadashi's, having a stupefied face. Rias. Is something wrong? Kadashi. Issei, is that you? Rias's eyes widened in complete astonishment as she saw that the three siblings knew who that person was, but the question was, how did they know? The incessant sea of questions invaded the members of the Grimor clan who could not imagine that this boy had anything to do with the next new nobility of his clan. Issei. Nice to meet you, my name is Hyodo Issei. End Chapter 2. First, previous ch3 of 38 next. 4. Chapter 3, I am a demon. The Dark Demon Hunter. Chapter 3 Inches Am I a Demon? The faces of astonishment left each and every one of the members of the Grimor nobility when they heard Kadashi's simple words which implied that he knew that boy who just yesterday was completely dead, but thanks to Rias he managed to save himself. But now the most important thing about the matter was to know what the relationship was between the three brothers and that mysterious boy, but before any soul could mention a single word, a few simple words came out of their lips. Nice to meet you, my name is Hyodo Issei. Everyone, upon hearing his name, could finally realize what had happened. The boy in front of them was familiar to Kadashi, Katsumi and Asami. Leaving their faces in complete disbelief, the three brothers began to analyze him from head to toe to be completely sure that he was the Issei from 10 years ago, and to their bad luck his resemblance was impressive, so much so that they carved their eyes several times as if that would resolve the doubts they had. Several seconds passed in which none of those present mentioned a single word, generating a great deafening silence that transformed the tense atmosphere into a quite uncomfortable one in which Katsumi and Asami had quite varied expressions. Katsumi's was completely angry at having her old brother back when she remembered that he had disappeared years ago after what she said was responsible for her father's death, while Asami had a face of nostalgia and at the same time of indifference to see again the one she considered the brother he loved the most. For a moment he thought about running and making sure this wasn't a dream, but something inside prevented him from expressing any feelings. On the part of the members of the Grimor clan, they were quite serious about the subject and were wondering how it was possible that their brother was found almost dead in the middle of the forest. Rias thought about the matter several times until she remembered that according to the academic records, there are only 3 people in the entire Kuo Academy with the surname Hyodo, these being Katashi, Katsumi and Asami, so it was practically impossible for the name Issei not to be among the school's academic records. Without wasting any more time, Rias began to look at Issei, who gave her a cold look without a hint of feelings, which generated some surprise in her when she noticed that look that only a very dangerous being would have on his face. Rias, excuse me, I would like to know if you have any relationship with them. Rias said while pointing to the three brothers who were looking at him seriously, where Issei, turning to look at them, began to detail them better and only small, quite bitter memories came to his head, taking shape in his mind the tragic day when he lost his father. Issei. No. Without any hint of emotion in his words, he denied Rias' crude response, which generated a feeling of anger on the part of Katashi and Katsumi, whose teeth began to grind to the point that their dentures grinded with the force impressed on them. It didn't take long until Katsumi was aware of Issei's presence. She stood up from her seat, quickly approaching until she was at her height, looking at him with anger and rage, while Issei gave her a serious and emotionless look. Katsumi. First because of you our father dies and now you deny being our brother, you are a damn idiot. Katsumi shouted, looking piercingly at Issei, who was not intimidated by the words of the girl in front of him and just looked at her more carefully, realizing who she really was and just remembering that it was his older sister. Just an expression of disgust appeared on his face, which everyone present noticed instantly. Seeing that both of them were looking at each other with an expression as if they were enemies, Rias wanted to intervene to avoid a terrible confrontation between them, but she was stopped by Issei who raised her arm, extending his hand as a sign that there was no problem. Issei. I didn't think I would see you again Katsumi. Just those little words from Issei caused Katsumi's fury to be reflected on her face, clenching her fists so tightly that some blood came out of her palms from the force of being called by her name by someone she detested with all her might. At that moment, in the heat of the moment, it was Katashi who stood up, grabbing her sister by the jacket of her academy uniform, trying to prevent a fight from taking place in the room. Katsumi. I don't want you to call me with such idiotic familiarity again. Katashi. Sister, calm down. Katsumi, now calmer thanks to her brother's words, decided to sit once again on the living room couch, turning her head in another direction where Issei was not. Everyone looked at this scene in disbelief, mainly Rias who did not expect a situation like this to happen and just stared at Katsumi who had that feeling of anger and annoyance for having Issei so close and was just wondering why he did it. I hated it so much, but I could have those questions very soon when I had more trust with her. Katashi. By the way, why did you need us? Katashi spoke towards Rias who had been taken out of her thoughts by the older Hyodo and focused on the most important thing about the meeting. Rias. Maybe you don't remember, but yesterday when the three of them returned home during the night they were attacked by a fallen angel where you were killed while trying to protect your sisters. Katashi. Killed. The older Hyodo was completely in shock as he watched his two sisters who had a sad face when remembering a certain scene in which Katashi, trying to confront that fallen angel to try to protect Katsumi and Asami, was pierced by a large spear of light. That pierced the lower part of his torso, causing him to die slowly. Katashi didn't know what to think and was just trying to remember the event, but it was completely useless. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't remember what happened. A few seconds passed in which Katashi realized something, and it was that, if he had actually been murdered, then because he was there completely healthy. He didn't waste any more time and just turned to look at Rias who had a slight smile on her face because of how confused Katashi was. Rias. I know you're wondering why you don't remember him or why you're still alive, but the answer is quite simple. Getting up from his seat and the other members of the room standing next to him, observing the Hyodo brothers who were in front of them, they began to show their wings, which could be seen to belong to a strange being more similar to those of a creature they saw in anime series or something similar. Rias. They must know that the Kuo Academy Occult Club is only a facade to hide its true purpose. Katashi. Purpose. Rias. We are demons. These words left the three brothers with their mouths open, who did not know what to say or think in the face of this great revelation. They never imagined that the most popular people at the academy where they attended would be demons, but even so for a moment they thought that it was a simple joke to see what reaction they would have, but the confidence with which Rias said her words accompanied by the black wings more similar to a strange being made him doubt his thoughts and they only remained expectant. Issei, on the other hand, upon hearing those words, the only thing he could do was frown, having a little anger at having real demons in front of him, since he was little he had been taught that demons were evil beings who only cared about him for their own and that, if they needed to sacrifice one of their companions, they would do so without hesitation, but something caught their attention. If they were really demons, why didn't they seem that way? Hardening his gaze, trying to have a clear explanation, he remained without saying a single word and preferred to continue observing the scene in front of his eyes. Asami, what do you mean by being demons? The younger sister of the Hyodo asked, having an incredulous face as she did not understand what was happening in that place, but Rias, noticing her doubts, did not waste her time explaining the situation to them. Rias, first I will answer your questions. The reason why you don't remember anything from yesterday is because we replaced your memories with new ones, and the fact that you are still alive is because I reincarnated you into a demon. Katashi. Now the older Hyodo was completely speechless and just looked at himself from head to toe, wondering if the redhead's words were true, but when he looked at himself again and again he didn't feel any change in his body, although he did think about it well from the beginning. Tomorrow he had felt a great difference in his abilities, feeling, so to speak, a little stronger than normal, standing out in physical education class, possessing athletic ability superior to that of the other male members of the Kuo Academy, that in the eyes of his classmates, class was quite impressive. Katashi. I don't feel anything different, although I did notice something strange this morning. Rias. Yes, I learned that you excelled in sports in today's class. That is the advantage of being a demon. You can become stronger as time goes by and your life will increase enormously. Katsumi. I don't understand something. How did you reincarnate my brother into a demon? Katsumi asked, somewhat confused by some facts that were not completely clear. Rias. So that you understand the explanation, I would like to know if you know the game of chess. Rias asked the three brothers, who looked at each other and then nodded at her words as a sign of understanding. Rias. Perfect, we high-class demons use the same system of the chess game to reincarnate demons into our slaves. For example, Akano is my queen, Kiba is my knight, Kaneko my rook and Asia my bishop. Akano. Normally chess pieces give different characteristics to each of their users. In the case of Asia, her piece gives her superior mastery of magic, granting her large magical reserves for performing spells. Kaneko's piece gives her strength and superhuman resistance to that of the other pieces. Kiba, by possessing the knight's piece, obtains superior speed, giving him greater mobility against his adversaries, and in my case, who possesses the queen's piece, I have the capabilities of the aforementioned pieces. Everyone in the room who heard Akano's explanation remained expectant, gaining a better understanding of the situation they were in, but something more important was missing, and that was what piece Katashi possessed. Just thinking about this made him imagine what abilities he might have: strength, speed and greater magical properties. That would be what any fool who watched anime or read manga would dream of possessing. Katashi. In that case, what piece do I have? His question was somewhat interesting for the group of demons who smiled at the doubt their new partner had. Rias. You are the pawn. Without a doubt, these are his words. Rias answered his question, perplexing Katashi, who felt somewhat disappointed for being a piece that was normally not so important in chess, or that was what the three brothers' thoughts were about. Katashi. The pawn. With a depressive aura surrounding him throughout his body, Katashi felt quite disappointed knowing that he was practically the most useless piece in the chess game, and only a look of annoyance appeared on his face, trying to avoid the glances of the members of the nobility. Rias. The redhead, upon noticing this, only approached Katashi using her hand, placing it on his chin and then raising her head until it was at his level and then smiling at him with some affection, where Katashi, seeing that face that gave him a feeling of confidence and at the same time hypnotized by Rias's great beauty, he could not prevent his cheeks from taking on a great blush tone and his eyes lighting up from having the number one idol of the Kuo Academy so close. With a lot of nerves and sweating profusely, Katashi tried to say a few words, but the redhead wouldn't allow it because she was so close to him. Rias. You should know that the pawn piece is not as useless as it seems. Stepping aside, leaving Katashi in front of his friend Akano, who looked at him with a smile while touching his cheek with her right hand. Akano. Finally we have you, Katashi Hyodo, our pawn, who, just like in the game of chess, has the ability to promote you to any of our pieces, taking our skills for your benefit. Rias. In other words, you are one of the strongest pieces in my clan. Katashi, upon hearing this, was quite fascinated and happy to know that he was not as useless as he seemed. his sisters Katsumi and Asami rushed towards their brother congratulating him for having skills worthy of being a demon, but that small celebration did not last long until Rias interrupted them. Rias, what do you two tell me? Do you want to join my entourage and be a demon? Both sisters looked at each other in the eyes a little surprised by Rias's words, but, although another would have doubted their answer, this was not the case for them since without any doubt in their words they looked at Rias with a smile on their faces. Faces responding with a loud and audible, yes, which was filled with happiness and excitement knowing that they would be members of something spectacular. The members of Rias's peerage were more than happy to know that they would have more companions in her group and celebrating would not be strange at all. After all, the Crimson Princess would soon have her entire entourage. Rias, well, first come to your Katsumi. Katsumi did as he asked, sitting in one of the armchairs in the living room where he could see that Rias, from a small black box with some red details, having an ornament like a small red demon with wings, looked quite beautiful for her taste, but when he revealed the inside of the box everyone was surprised, but the bright crimson red color that came out of that box showing its interior where there were a rook piece and a bishop piece. Rias took the bishop piece and approaching Katsumi created a large magic circle around her with the symbol of the Grimor clan. Everyone except Rias's entourage opened their eyes wide as they witnessed a spectacle that did not even let them blink because of how impressive it was. Raising the piece near Katsumi's chest, it shines very intensely, having a great flash of red. Rias, Katsumi Hyodo, become my faithful servant, protect me and serve me as your master, dedicating your life to me for all eternity. Katsumi, I agree. Next, the bishop piece was introduced into his chest, when a strong magical energy was present where a strong purple aura surrounded him, demonstrating an innate affinity to magic along with his body which had been reinforced by the demonic power becoming as strong as that of a rook, which left all the members of the Grimor clan baffled who knew beforehand that the bishop piece was generally physically weak. Rias, upon seeing that massive amount of magic in Katsumi, couldn't help but smile as a sign of satisfaction for having a piece like her, but her smile didn't last long until Asami, out of the desire to be reincarnated into a demon, caught her attention, taking her for granted, the sleeve of his uniform trying to get his attention. Asami, now I'll follow. Rias, Of course, take a seat. Asami took a seat in the same chair as her sister where Rias took out her last piece which was a tower from inside the box and then created another crimson red magic circle to surround Asami around her where the tower piece was placed next to her. The height of your chest. Repeating the same procedure with the younger Hyodo, the tower piece was introduced into her body where, upon standing up, Asami opened her eyes wide, looking at the palms of her hands, feeling a great force that in her opinion was strange and enormous, without wasting any more time. She wanted to test her new strength and with a single blow she managed to break the chair where she was sitting, leaving it in small pieces of splinters. The members of the Grimor entourage were more than satisfied with the new companions they had acquired in just one day and it didn't take long for the three brothers to begin to rejoice at the skills they now possessed. Rias, well that was mainly what I wanted to talk to you three, then we can talk about the obligations of being a demon. The three brothers looked at each other in unison wondering what Rias was referring to. Asami, what do you mean by obligations? Rias, you must know that you three Katashi, Katsumi and Asami are now reincarnated demons for obvious reasons. You are much stronger and faster than a normal human and as reincarnated demons of my clan you must serve me as your master. Katashi, what will we have to do as reincarnated demons? Rias, well, first they would have to distribute pamphlets with which we make contracts with other humans, but now that task is entrusted to our relatives, so their job will be to place orders with other people in exchange for a valuable object. Katsumi, one last question, a while ago you said that we would serve you as your slaves. Rias, that's correct, as reincarnated demons you will live for all eternity and that means that you will have to serve me during this period of time, well that will only be until you are promoted to high-class demons and you will be able to have your own slaves. Katashi, so if we want to be promoted we only have to comply with the contracts. Rias, you are correct. The three brothers by that point were more than excited to start with their obligations as demons and already wanted to start with the contracts, where they tried to ask if they could make a contract at that very moment, but apparently at the moment they had no pending orders so they had to settle for waiting to make a contract. Rias, well, I think we're done for today, if you want you can go home. But at that moment Rias's attention was focused on her queen Akano, who was whispering in her ear a very important matter which she had forgotten. Akano. Rias, remember that we have unfinished business with that boy. Rias at that moment took on a more serious face, directing her gaze towards Issei, who still remained in his place, quite annoyed because they had ignored him practically all the time just to focus on his brothers, but when he realized that everyone's attention was focused he relaxed his expression a little, looking at Rias, who was still looking at him with those eyes that gave him a feeling of annoyance knowing that he had a legitimate demon in front of him, but even so, that girl had saved him from death, so he swallowed his pride and contempt for simply being a demon, bowed respectfully towards the Crimson Princess. Issei. Thank you. Those words left everyone in the room speechless because of Issei's manners and respect, although his brothers still looked at him with the same expressions as a while ago. Rias. Why are you thanking me? Issei. It's from the blonde girl that you saved me, so I thank you for that. Rias. It's nothing. Issei. With your permission I leave. Issei only turned around heading towards the exit door of the club, leaving all the members of Rias's nobility stunned, including his brothers, who did not understand what had happened to him and how he had returned after so many years. Rias, noticing that he was about to leave, remembered that he never mentioned to her that he was also part of his nobility and only motioned to Kiba to stop him. Kiba understood what he had to do and moved at a great speed worthy of the knight's peace, remaining in front of Issei, who looked into his eyes, changing his expression to one of annoyance. Issei. What do you think you're doing, pretty boy? Kiba. I can't let you go, my president has something important to tell you. Turning towards Rias, Issei stared at her piercingly with those eyes that did not inspire any type of feeling or shine in his eyes, but the redhead did not let herself be intimidated by that look and only went on to explain the situation. Rias. I'm afraid you can't leave until I explain what's happening. Issei. I already told you that I thank you for saving me, but I have more important things to do. Rias. And does that have to do with the fact that we found you almost on the brink of death last night? Issei, upon hearing her question, only turned his head to avoid Rias's gaze, which upon seeing her action made him more curious to know what had happened to him. On the part of Issei's brothers, they still did not understand what was happening and only they remained expectant of what Rias was about to say, although due to the situation and the atmosphere they had an idea of the outcome of that conversation. Issei. You could say it has something to do with it, but it's something important that I have to do, that's why I need to go. Rias, looking at Issei, still did not understand his words, but she knew that the reasons could be somewhat personal, so she preferred not to ask a topic that was possibly very delicate. Giving a heavy sigh, he looked closely at Issei, who was still impatient to know what they wanted to tell him. Rias. Wherever you want to go, let me tell you, you can't do it. Issei. What? Rias. Maybe you haven't realized it yet, but yesterday when we were trying to heal you, Asia, when you were presumed dead, asked me to save you. So you Hyodo Issei, as a knight of Rias Grimori and a member of the Grimori clan, you must protect me and serve me as your master, dedicating your life to me for all eternity. A great silence fell in the room in which Issei had no words to say or refute, and the only thing that went through his head were thoughts of disgust at himself for having become the last thing in the world he wanted to be, and he preferred to die rather than to become a demon. With clear anger on his face directed towards Rias, Issei clenched her fists as a sign of annoyance, where Kiba and Kaneko, noticing that clear hostility, placed themselves in the middle of her president in case Issei thought of trying to attack her. Katsumi. You should be grateful to President Rias, after all reincarnating a useless person like you is a big waste. Issei. Shut your mouth, no one asked for your opinion. Issei said towards Katsumi, where the aforementioned, upon hearing his words, was about to rush towards Issei to hit him, but at that moment Asami began to approach him while she had her gaze lowered and her hair covered her eyes. When she was in front of Issei, she looked him in the eyes with a look of unfriendliness as she said to him. Asami. Apologized to Katsumi. Issei was quite impressed by the actions of his younger sister, who gave him a cold and angry look and only complained about his behavior. Issei. What if I don't? At that point, Asami's patience reached such a point that the tender and pretty little sister that Issei knew ended up hitting him hard in the stomach, generating strong pain that if it weren't for the fact that he was a demon, that blow would have killed him on the spot. But that didn't stop her from spitting out a mouthful of blood. When Asami came to her senses and realized what she had done, She was very scared because she didn't expect it would hurt her so much, and she only cursed herself for not remembering what she had. The tower piece. Asami. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Trying to help his brother up, Issei quickly separated from Asami, giving him a look of pain and anger at the same time and clenching his fists tightly. He tried to stay calm, and the only thing he could think of was to punch the wall hard of the building with the little or no strength he had left, where a considerable amount of blood came out from his knuckles, but although the force he had used was considerable, the pain in his hand did not compare to the strong blow that Asami hit him with. About to leave the building, he was stopped by some last words from Rias. Let me give you a warning, if you escape you will become a street demon. The evil piece that is inside you will begin to release demonic power without control, creating mutations in you. Issei. Why the hell is this happening to me? Leaving through the door and seconds later slamming it with such force that one could even say that the loud roar was heard all the way to the street. Leaving the remodeled building, he just wanted to be alone to avoid having to see her brothers, who were still the same idiots as always, and apparently Asami, with the blow he had given her, had no doubt that stupidity ran in the family. End chapter 3. First previous ch 4 of 38 next. 5. Chapter 4 Encounter with a Fallen One. The Dark Demon Hunter. Chapter 4 Inches Encounter with a Fallen One. Walking aimlessly, Issei was very angry, cursing the bad luck he had had in the last few months. First, he was forced to stay alone for several weeks. Second, he was brutally murdered by a former friend from a long time ago. Third, upon waking up and finding out that he was saved from death by being turned into a demon, the creature that since childhood he had striven to want to destroy and now transform into what he detested most, made him want to vomit blood. And to make matters worse, not only did he now have the responsibility of taking care of a red-haired girl, believing himself to be his owner, but now he would have to endure his brothers whom he had not seen for more than 10 years. All that accumulated stress and thoughts of remorse and anger, wishing that Akame had killed him at that moment, made him think if he was worthy of the new opportunity of life that was given to him despite being a disgusting demon. Time passed as Issei walked near a park not far from Kuo Academy, where the temptation of wanting to escape from this new life he now had began to fill his thoughts little by little, but those ideas were immediately discarded after remembering the Rias's words. Let me give you a warning, if you escape you will become a street demon. The evil piece that is inside you will begin to release demonic power without control, creating mutations in you. Quite confused thinking about what the redhead meant. Only strange ideas passed through his head, analyzing the different scenarios in which he could be unlucky enough that if the case occurred, he would escape. The supposed evil piece would begin to create mutations all over his body, forming radical changes such as resembling an anthropomorphic animal or some strange creature, made him want to vomit from disgust, and it was not very difficult for him to deduce that if his body were to mutate in that way, it would not take long for that he was hunted by Rias's group, causing him to be more depressed than before. Issei, feeling that way, decided to approach a fountain that was in the park near the academy, observing its panorama better, realizing that the place was completely desolate without any soul near the place, where he began to wonder if it had happened. It had been so long since he went out for a walk, but looking at the sky better he could see that it had already gotten dark, which was quite strange because only about an hour had passed since he left the old building and there were a few hours left before the sun went down. Thinking about that situation, it didn't take long for the sky of the place to begin to change its tone to a darker one with colors that changed between purple, dark blue and black. Issei. What is happening? Wow, I didn't expect to find a demon here. But at that moment some words caught Issei's attention, who looked in the direction in which that voice was heard, only to remain with his eyes wide open when he saw in front of him a young, attractive woman, around his same age, with she had long black hair down to her hips, violet eyes, and her outfit consisted of a short black dress, with a small light violet jacket, and on the part of her back protruding some kind of black wings like those of a crow. Issei. Who are you? A bad feeling harbored deep inside Issei, who saw that girl observing him with a serious look and at the same time slowly approaching him. It's strange that at this point you don't know who I am, but it doesn't matter, you won't live long to find out. By this point Issei was already quite nervous about the situation he was suffering at that moment. Since once again his life was at stake, but this time for a girl with black wings, Although anyone else would be scared by that situation and she would try to escape to find a safe place, the truth is that Issei did not care about this fact and the only action he could think of to take was to remain motionless in his place, implying that he would not do anything to avoid what the girl had planned to do to him. This action by Issei left the girl a little confused and patting her head a little to see if her mind was playing a bad joke on her. She did not take her eyes off Issei, but thanks to her great curiosity to clear her doubts she decided to ask. Are you not thinking of fleeing or escaping? Issei. No. Being perplexed by that answer that gave no indication that it was a deception or a lie, she placed her hand on her chin to better observe Issei who was standing as if waiting for her to kill him once and for all. Why not? Are you an idiot? Issei. Because I don't care if you kill me or not. If you're going to kill me, do it once and for all because I don't have all day. Issei's words left the girl completely perplexed by his response. She would never expect that someone, especially a demon, would agree to die without at least trying to defend herself using her sacred gear, but this was not the case. The boy in front of her was facing her, giving her free rein to do with him whatever she wanted, and her thoughts of killing him changed to wanting to know more about why his attitude was so negative. But ignoring her thoughts, she composed herself and looked at him more seriously, and then from her hand created a large spear of light of a resplendent purple color, pointing it directly at Issei, who watched in amazement as the girl had summoned that weapon, but it did not take long until the girl rose a few meters from the ground, launching the powerful spear towards her target, where all Issei did was close his eyes waiting for the attack. A few seconds passed and nothing happened. By that point the brunette should have already felt the pain of the attack, and somewhat confused he opened his eyes slowly, seeing how the girl still had the spear of light in her hand, making it disappear, confusing Issei a little because of her action. Issei. What's happening? I thought you wanted to kill me. And you're not wrong, I was about to kill you, but that attitude you have catches my attention. What is your name? Issei. I am Hyodo Issei. So Issei. I am Rainier. The girl now known as Rainier began to approach Issei, who was still waiting for what the girl in front of him was planning to do, but it was still quite strange to him that she wanted to kill him, since as far as he knew, he had never seen or met her anywhere. Chance. Issei, having the fall so close, could only stay out of the situation while he was observed by those violet eyes while they analyzed him from head to toe. Rainier, tell me something, how long have you been a demon? Issei. As far as I know, only a few hours. Rainier. That explains it. Closing her eyes, quite disappointed, she began to walk away from Issei, sitting on a wooden bench that was in the park and then staring at the brunette with a serious and disappointing look. Issei noticed this and only frowned to see how he was seen by those eyes that told him with clear contempt, "You are pathetic." The internal fury of being seen like that gave him no respite, and at that moment the desire to pounce came to his mind. Against the girl, but if he did, Rainier would not hesitate to kill him. With notable anger and swallowing her hatred, he decided to ask. Issei. What do you mean that explains it? Issei asked, trying not to look into her eyes, avoiding eye contact, where Rainier, surprised by Issei's question, raised an eyebrow in confusion, only to give a big tired sigh. Rainier. I mean your demon aura, I can feel it, but it's not very strong. If you and I fought I would end up killing you very quickly, so it would be quite boring for me. Issei, listening to Rainier's confession, could no longer stand it, and as he did in the occult club, he hit his right hand against a tree in the park, trying to relieve his frustration and anger at feeling weak. The blood once again protruded from his knuckles, leaving threads of blood on the bark of the tree while a small pain intensified in his hand, squeezing it tightly to try to relieve the pain he felt, where Rainier, seeing this small scene, only patted her hand. Head for witnessing an act as silly and childish as the one Issei had done, and, motioning for him to accompany her on the bench, she tried to hide a little the laughter that could be caused by the brown-haired boy's act. Issei, still frustrated, had no choice but to accept Rainier's invitation and just proceeded to sit a few centimeters away from her. Rainier looking out of the corner of her eye at Issei, who had an annoyed face focusing mainly on his hand which could be seen to be quite hurt, and giving a slight sigh she grabbed his hand to Issei's surprise, giving it light rubs trying to relieve the pain a little. Pain I was feeling. Rainier. How childish you are. Scoffing under her breath, Rainier couldn't help but think about what a silly outburst she had had, and to avoid not laughing would be something impossible for her. For Issei's part, he looked away from the fall, trying to avoid her mockery, which was completely impossible to avoid. Rainier. Tell me the reason. Issei. I don't know what you mean. Rainier. Why do you hurt yourself when there is no need to? Trying to avoid Rainier's question, Issei only lowered his head as a sign that he felt quite sad for remembering the teachings since he was very little. Rainier noticed this and wondered what the brunette was thinking and used his right hand to raise Issei's chin, leaving both at a height where their eyes met. The fall expressed a look that denoted confidence and concern as he treated his injured hand with his right hand. Issei, looking at those eyes which reminded him of a certain person, couldn't help but trust her even though he didn't know her at all. Rainier, you are suffering for something, I can see it in your eyes. Issei, it's nothing, it's just nonsense. Rainier, sometimes telling your problems to others helps you face any situation no matter how serious it may seem. Issei didn't know what to think. Just remembering his teacher made him want to shed tears over what happened a few weeks ago, where having the need to escape incessantly over and over again from his former comrades made him want to let them kill him many times. To end his suffering, but his motivation to carry out his revenge was stronger than the fact of being wanted again and again to be killed, although on one occasion he was, so to speak, murdered, and it was better that they continue thinking that for now. Issei, maybe you don't want to hear the story of a traitor. Rainier. What are you talking about? Rainier's words were complete surprise. She couldn't imagine that something like this would happen. A traitor. It was absurd if you thought about it better, but she, being a fallen angel, understood well what it was like to be a traitor and deserter, since she, being a fallen angel, committed sin by betraying heaven, being banished and sent with the other fallen angels. Comforting herself and standing firm, she spoke in a stronger tone to know what the boy in front of her was referring to. Issei. I'm just saying that my story is somewhat complicated. Rainier, could you start telling me what's bothering you? Issei. The most important thing you should know is that I do not belong to this city. Rainier raised an eyebrow in confusion at Issei's statement, and instead of asking she decided to continue listening. Issei. In the past I used to have what you normally call a home and a family, but all that changed when I was recruited to be trained by a group of swordsmen with the aim of hunting demons. Rainier, who was still arranging the bones and joints of Issei's hand, opened her eyes wide upon hearing this revelation from the brunette, where several questions arose in her head, since she had never heard of any group that was dedicated to that work. What they had told him was how the street demons which transformed into bloodthirsty beasts were hunted by the different clans of the underworld. Rainier. And what happened? Why aren't you with them? Issei. The reason is, because they want to kill me for something I didn't do. Issei, lost in his thoughts, began to remember a fragment of his past, where Rainier remained expectant and surprised by the brunette's words, who stopped the healing of his hand for a few moments to hear more of his story. Memory. Burning fire was what I remembered that day, anguish, fear, pain, and hunger to demonstrate my strength in that test of strength in which I found myself facing one of my brothers to see who of the two would emerge victorious. If I were not very smart, I would say that that battle had been planned by one of my teachers in order to make me advance in my constant training, which, so to speak, according to Master Kanbi and Master Soma, I never stood out in almost anything, pushing me to my limits. Most adverse conditions I was forced to fight day and night against each and every one of my clan brothers, but even so I always found myself defeated again and again, lying on the ground as if I were a piece of garbage. No matter how hard I tried to catch up with them, time and time again they remained one step ahead of me, even when Master Kanbi ordered me and Takeshi to face each other one-on-one with a wooden sword in my hands, about to collide with the force of my opponent. Each and every one of my blows were as precise as possible. I saw how the fruits of arduous training were present. Having Takeshi against the ropes at some point, blow after blow. Blood spilled on the floor and large, dark bruises on my body were reason enough to fall to the ground from exhaustion, and that could have been the case, but there was a moment in which Takeshi, being overconfident, made a mistake which I knew how to easily take advantage of, managing to hit between his waist, and then give a strong horizontal blow towards his face, but said attack never came, and instead he was able to dodge it easily. Analyzing better the moment of the following clashes, I never expected him to use the fire orbs that rested humbly throughout the combat zone, and throwing one of them towards my face, made me lose vision and concentration of my actions, making me connect 3 strong blows, one in my crotch, another in my stomach, and finally on my face, leaving me lying on the floor. If I'm honest, I remember that blow perfectly. A sharp attack with such force that it made me bleed from the top of my head, but the teaching did not end there when I was able to witness in front of me Master Kanbi approaching me asking me, "Do you did Takeshi's punch hurt?" With clear contempt in his words he asked again, "Do you think that's real pain?" "You're wrong." Holding me tightly by the top of my clothes he looked at me seriously in the eyes, where it didn't take much time to feel how the hand my teacher's uniform went deep into my stomach, generating pain that I would never forget in my entire short life. With great weakness I fell to the ground inertly screaming incessantly in pain until finally I could hear his last words, "That's real pain." End of memory. Rainier. Hey, Issei-kun, wake up. Issei. What? Jumping from his seat, Issei was confused by the sudden interruption of the fall and just stood still in his place thinking about that memory. Rainier looked at him strangely at his strange attitude, imagining how hard his life could have been until now, and luckily for her, she had concluded the treatment of his hand by giving him a strong pull to the side, making Issei's bones grind a little, generating some pain in him. Pain that disappeared over time. Rainier. Well, I'm done. Issei. Thank you. Issei said as he moved his hand little by little, getting a little used to the movement of the fingers that still felt the slight discomfort of the blow. Rainier. Well, it's time to go, I've been in the human world for too long. Turning around and raising her wings like a bird, she took flight away from Issei. Before leaving, Rainier turned in his direction, saying a few last words that made Issei, who was watching her from afar, smile slightly. Rainier. When we meet again, I hope you will tell me the rest of your story. Retreating into the thick purple and dark blue sky, the sea of sensations of uncertainty and joy were reflected on his face knowing that he would not die, at least for now. The sky little by little began to change its tone to that of the dense night, bringing back memories of the temple balcony that he shared with Akame on those cold nights after training, although it was very good at not being caught by the guards, in the most of the time he was caught by his teacher sneaking into his former friend's room, only to suffer hell in the form of torture because of his pranks since he was a child. Remaining motionless for a while without taking his eyes off the direction in which the fall went, a small stimulus coming from his back became noticeable, gaining his attention. Looking away from the dense darkness of the night, he turned in the direction where he thought he was. They had knocked, to the surprise that it was Asia, who was breathing heavily while she looked with difficulty in the direction of his eyes. Issei, noticing that the blonde looked quite tired and agitated, raised an eyebrow in surprise and decided to cross her arms, being serious about seeing the blonde like that. Issei. What are you doing here? Taking a deep breath, Asia comforted herself and caught her breath answering his question. Asia. I was worried about you, Issei-san. Widening his eyes, Issei couldn't believe that anyone other than his former friend Akame cared about him. Issei. I don't know you and you don't know me. Why would you worry about me? He asked in a serious and dry tone, looking carefully at Asia who was thinking about his question. Although it was true that she did not know him, that did not mean that she was not worried about his condition, after having found him almost dead in the middle of the forest.